Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the Office of the Secretary of the Senate for helping me with this visual aid. On your desks this morning, you found this very rudimentary chart that I've provided for all the senators today, and I'll just in a second I'll get into what this chart means. But the first observation I have today is that, you know, we all would like to imagine what we would have done under certain circumstances, whether it's historical events, or maybe it's the story, The Emperor's New Clothes. When we read that story in elementary school or middle school, we thought, how ridiculous is it that there's an emperor who's naked and everybody in the royal court is pretending that the emperor has clothes. But I think when you live through modern times like this, you get a much better appreciation for the types of social pressures that could convince a group of very serious people with badges and pins and ties or formal attire to lie about what their own eyes are seeing right in front of them. So let's start with the truth, and let me be very blunt, and blunt in a way that I don't think any speaker heretofore has been. The reason that Senate Resolution 563 is on the floor is because the president of this chamber, who is standing about 6 feet behind me, is running in a primary against Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to be held on May 19th to determine the Republican nominee for governor of the state of Georgia. And that's the only reason that this Senate resolution is on the floor. Now, that reason is complicated because it bears with it threads of other reasons that flow through it, such as Donald Trump is a narcissist who is still obsessed with the results of the 2020 election in Georgia. And his obsession runs so deep that it's 2026 and we haven't stopped talking about it. What that means for our state politics is that anybody who is a loyal Trump follower or acolyte is required to carry water for Donald Trump in every way that he sees fit. And in this election, that means continuing the baseless conspiracy theory claims that the 2020 election was somehow stolen, or that Fulton County somehow had quote-unquote suitcases of ballots. The FBI raid that we saw is an outcropping of this. This resolution is an outcropping of this. And all it does is pit the Senate Republicans in this chamber against Brad Raffensperger for purposes of primary politics. That's 100% all that it does. And I think that most people in here, and the people in the ante room and who are checking their phone over on this side as well, are pretty tired of the normal political talking points on both sides of this issue, because we've heard them a million times, not just today, but we've been hearing them since 2020. We're very dug in terms of the political narratives that are being used to describe the situation. So I thought it would be best to go to Psychology 101 when it comes to narcissism. You're familiar with the DSM, which describes clinical psychological conditions that you can be diagnosed with. Clinical really just meaning it interferes with your daily life, right? All of us are a little bit egotistical and narcissistic when push comes to shove, but if you have narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, it means that you are clinically diagnosable. Now, I do not have training as a psychologist, and I'm not qualified from a distance to diagnose the president, Donald Trump, as a malignant narcissist. But let's just assume, let's suspend your disbelief for a moment and pretend that Donald Trump is clinically diagnosable as a narcissist with narcissistic personality disorder. In that case, I would humbly submit to you that Donald Trump functions somewhat like a parent to elected Republicans. I say somewhat because obviously you all have your own parents, you came from families, loving or not, you've walked a long path professionally and personally to become members of the Georgia State Senate, and so I'm not saying that Donald Trump is literally your daddy. What I am saying, though, is that for political hierarchical purposes, he functions much like your father, in the sense that if he says something and you don't comply with it, there's a risk that your basic needs as an elected will not be met. Think about that from the family context, right? If a parent says this is the way it goes, and the child says, no, I'm not okay with that, the risk always looming in the background is that the basic security and provision of needs that that parent provides will somehow be taken away. I think there's an easy analogy to be made that in the elected Republican world, Donald Trump provides your basic needs at this point in history, or at the very least, he could take them away. He could threaten you by targeting you like the Eye of Sauron, like a laser, to put on Truth Social or on Twitter Senator from the 30th, you've been very bad, and now I'm going to laser you and make sure that you get a primary opponent that is supported by Donald Trump. We have seen this time and time again, that Republicans have been terrified to cross Trump because their basic needs might be undermined as elected officials. And I'll say more on that in a second, because I think we need to unpack what your basic needs are as Republican elected officials and how Donald Trump actually is threatening them more than protecting them. But the literature is very clear. There are three basic types of adult children of narcissistic parents. So what I'm talking about is in the family context, when you're raised with a narcissistic parent, there are three personality types that develop among the kids who have the unfortunate circumstance of being stuck in that environment. They are the golden child, the scapegoat, and the invisible child. I'll go ahead and cover the invisible child quickly because we should get them out of the way. They are invisible after all. The invisible child is the person who doesn't really fit the narcissist narrative about what's happening in the family. They're not useful to the narcissist. Because see, for the narcissist, everything's about them, right? For the narcissist, they don't care about the needs of other people. All they care about is making sure that their very narrowly defined needs are met. The NPD diagnosis has 9 characteristics that float around quickly. Grandiose sense of self-importance, right? It's the best, it's going to be the best you've ever seen, right? Frequent fantasies about having or deserving, I don't know, Greenland, for example. Belief in superiority, America first. Need for admiration, my inauguration crowd was the biggest of all time. Entitlement, I can shut down the Kennedy Center for 2 years. I can destroy the East Wing of the White House and put up gold gilded BS all over the Oval Office. Number 6, willingness to exploit others. Every single business deal that Donald Trump did before he became president, and all the ways his family has personally benefited, see Jared Kushner, from his time in office. 7, lack of empathy, saying that places are S-hole countries. And saying that Baltimore is a crap hole or whatever. Just the absolute disregard for the human beings that live in cities of the United States. Frequent envy. Greenland again. And also, why didn't I get the Nobel Peace Prize? I would like the Nobel Peace Prize. And 9 is arrogance, patronizing behavior, behaving in a way that's snobby or disdainful. I don't know, like having cabinet level officials buy new shoes because their shoes weren't good enough. Did you hear J.D. Vance crow about this? He was gleeful, right? That Donald Trump forced his guys to buy new shoes because of the optics of their shoes. This is the President of the United States, folks, that we're talking about. So I would say, even without a psychology degree, I feel fairly comfortable diagnosing Donald Trump as a narcissist from a distance. So now let's talk about you. My favorite topic here, always talking about you, Senate Republicans. If you are smart politically, if you are in line with the president's plans for his own election to the office of governor, which I think almost all of you are, I remember there were like 3 of you who didn't endorse the president for governor a few months ago, and I remember I texted somebody about that. I thought that was odd, and I was worried about the 3 of you. But all of you fit the category of golden child, or at the very least, you're playing the role of golden child. Now, you notice the little golden crown. I did that in honor of Donald Trump, right? He loves gold. Being the golden child means something very specific relative to the emotional crisis that the narcissists face. The golden child is the reflection of the positive, light-filled self-image that the narcissist has. I'll say that slightly differently. For the narcissist to cover up his bottomless insecurity, his bottomless sense of low self-esteem and low self-worth, he must concoct at all times a narrative that he is actually great, awesome. You could imagine like that SNL speech, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me, right? Your job as Senate Republicans who vote for this resolution is to help Donald Trump with this quest. It's to help him reinforce his positive self-image. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of leaps that have to happen before you get there, right? He doesn't like that he lost Georgia. It's a red state, right? What a smear on his public image that he lost Georgia, of all places, in 2020, 2 cycles ago. Really, really embarrassing stuff. So for you guys, and as Georgia Senate Republicans, the highest, best use of your lives, your attention spans, your work, is to help him fill that self-esteem gap, is to make sure that he doesn't have to look in the mirror and see a loser. The scapegoat is Brad Raffensperger. The scapegoat is the member of the family who was raised to take all the blame for all the things that go wrong in the family. So let's say, for example, that the narcissist in the family setting, you're all going out to dinner, right? You've got the parent driving, the kids in the car, and then all of a sudden while you're in the car, the president illegally deposes the leader of Venezuela and abducts him and takes him back to the United States for a trial, right? Or let's say while you're in the car on the way to the Olive Garden, the president raises tariffs arbitrarily that crush small businesses and, cause a lot of economic harm in the country. Now you guys as the golden child are in a pickle, right? Because you have to reinforce the positive self-image that the narcissist has. But how do you do that when the facts are so bad? How do you do that when ICE and Border Patrol are killing people in the streets, or tariffs are crushing small businesses, and I go, this is just me talking as Josh now, I go to an event for a group in Gwinnett County, and the leader of that group, which is, represents an immigrant minority community, says we were with Kemp, but now we're with Democrats because the tariffs are crushing our small businesses. This is a challenge for you guys. What do you do to reinforce the positive self-image of Donald Trump in these circumstances? Well, on tariffs, it's hard. On ICE, it's hard, right? I mean, you guys came up and gave some fairly circumspect speeches about the ICE or the CBP murder of Alex Preddy. You acknowledge we should talk about it. It's tough. That's because your Second Amendment folks are getting wedged on that, right? So that's much tougher. But elections? Oh, you guys are ready to go on elections. That's been one of your favorite punching bags for the last few years. We passed SB 202, we secured elections, we made them more, have more integrity. This is easy for you guys. So this is actually a layup, right? A Senate resolution that says, you bad Brad Raffensperger, you scapegoat, why didn't you overturn the election, right? Well, I don't know, because it was his job. Nobody in here had the job of certifying those elections. And I think if you guys were backed into a corner, many of you would not have taken the Jody Heiss route. I think many of you would have done the exact same thing. You would have certified the election results because it's your job, and you've got basic self-respect, right, when you look in the mirror and you do your job. But nobody in here had to do that job. So what did you do? 16 state senators signed a letter that the president of the chamber took to D.C. Didn't give it to Mike Pence, did leave it in the Uber. But that letter was a golden child move to say, we've got your back, Daddy. We've got your back. We're going to pretend alongside you that the election was stolen, and we're going to do tasteful, polite trims on Georgia election law so that we can corroborate your narrative that something is wrong with these elections. And the scapegoat just gets beat up, man. Why are you always doing stuff, Brad? The back seat of the car, right? Come on, Brad. Why aren't you going with the team on this one, Brad? Right? And you all hate it. I mean, some of you personally hate this, that Brad Raffensperger was on the cover of Time magazine with his hand up, right? Like some defender of democracy. And the fact that there are ladies who live in retirement communities in my district, I saw them on No King's Day. Guess what? They were holding No King signs because they vote Democratic and they love Brad Raffensperger. And why? Because there was a bipartisan consensus that at least at that minimum level, that Brad Raffensperger certify the elections the way he was supposed to, because it was his job. And there are a lot of people who appreciate that. Now, I'm not endorsing in the primary. I'm not endorsing Brad. I'm not endorsing the president of this chamber. I will be endorsing a Democrat for that race eventually. But I think it's clear that on the 3 steps here to freedom, you can think of this like 3 steps to freedom. This is sort of the most trapped part of this cycle on the conveyor belt. Scapegoat is still kind of trapped, right? Brad is still stuck in the back seat of the toxic Republican family car. Brad still has to do messaging such as a constitutional amendment to make sure that people can't illegally vote, even though that's redundant and it's already in statute. Or Brad Raffensperger supporting SB 202, which limited drop-box hours and early voting access and created a right for the state to take over local elections because, as Brad determined, that's not that bad. I should just go ahead and sign on to that. It may not make me a full golden child, but at least I can stay within this toxic family and not get completely kicked out. Even then, I can maybe run as a Republican. Now, this is not of interest to you guys because you guys want to keep staying in office. Some of you want to go to higher offices, but you want to keep being Republicans. I would humbly submit to you that the invisible child is happiest as a human being. The invisible child doesn't matter to the narcissist, and the narcissist doesn't matter to them. Now, granted, it's hard to grow up as the invisible child because the invisible child learns the lesson that these other two also learn, which is my needs don't matter, my voice doesn't matter, only the narcissist matters. I'm going to say something difficult, but I think it's true, and I think you need to hear it. I think that you have told yourselves that you can continue being dignified Republican elected officials who can survive the Trump moment. This too shall pass, and you can go back to representing your constituents the way that ideally you're supposed to, We hear a lot in this chamber and in the building about how Georgia's different. We're not DC. We're not caught up in all that partisan hand-wringing. You know, we can represent our constituents on the ground level. To some extent, I think sometimes that's true. What I think you guys are chronically ignoring is that every day that this gets worse, that becomes less true. Every day that this gets worse, Donald Trump's narcissism becomes your main objective, and it becomes the impetus for you to, as I said a few days ago, minimize, destroy your own voices. That is actually the real tragedy of this. I'll say it again. The destruction of your own voices and your own public consciences is the biggest tragedy in all of this. Georgia's going to, like, somebody will get elected. Somebody will be governor. The elections, I think, will happen this year, although if Trump thinks he can raid a bunch more local and state offices with the FBI, then some of that will be in question. But assuming the elections happen this year, this too shall pass. We will move on. Donald Trump will meet some kind of an end in terms of his time in office, and hopefully we can go back to our normal lives. But the damage that you have done for these last 10 years and on days like today to your own voices is going to be very hard to recover from. And I want to name a couple arguments I've heard today that are golden child arguments. I was disappointed, Senator from the 37th, to hear that the reason this resolution is harmless is because what do you have to hide? I was on a committee in the House with the Senator from the 37th where we addressed sensitive constitutional rights such as the Fourth Amendment, where feds, state government officials can't just knock down your door at your house and take whatever they want. The exact same arguments you heard from the Senator from the 37th today could be used to justify limitless search and seizure authority by the federal government to enter homes. Well, if you don't have anything to hide, then what's wrong? What's the problem with that? So that's not really a robust argument, I think, that gets out of this framework. I think that transparently shows itself to be a golden child argument that serves only one purpose. Or what about the Senator from the 6th, the esteemed Rules Chairman, who ripped out his own voice box and threw it on the ground and replaced it with a machine? I mean, it was funny in a quaint or cute sort of way, but not necessarily funny to his constituents who want him to have a spine, to his constituents who want all of us who are elected to come here and actually stand up for what's true and what's real. I thought it was one of the most deeply ironic presentations I've ever seen as a legislator in 8 years, that he read a ChatGPT speech about honesty and accountability. I mean, he literally said, we need to self-reflect. I was like, thank you for setting up my therapy talking points, Senator from the 6th. We do need to self-reflect and be honest. And the machine spat out words like match our actions to our values, or have open dialogue, or an environment where people feel safe. So if you think this is too snowflake, just consider the Senator from the 6th robot, which said that we need an environment to genuinely and honestly reflect, and that's the way to serve our constituents the best. Or let's go to the author's comments, Senator from the 29th. Going back to that mirror speech, the self-affirmations. I am not a MAGA. I am a conservative Georgia state senator. It has the flavor of protesting too much. If you have to look in the mirror and remind yourself that you're something other than a tool in a narcissist toolbox. So I genuinely have been impressed over the years with some of the presentations that I've seen by the Republican majority to alter or distort the real purpose of a bill for public consumption. But you should read the internet comment section if you haven't been recently. Nobody out there is buying it. Not a single Georgian is going to buy that this resolution has anything to do with anything except for that guy. And as reality starts to close in from all sides, electorally, morally, practically, on the failed arguments trying to prop up a narcissist, you will hear your own voices, the ones you're destroying, ring more hollow. You will hear yourself say things like, your social security number came from the federal government, it's already in the federal government's possession. And let me tell you, if I wanted to white page search you and stick a private investigator on you, your driver's license, your date of birth, all that stuff is in the public domain, so sit down and shut up, Georgians. All the constituent emails we got over the last few days about our sensitive voter information, not wanting it to fall in the hands of the federal government, all those people apparently, according to the majority, can sit down and shut up. And there are Republicans who are worried about data privacy too, but the message from Senate Republicans loud and clear today in this chamber is your data privacy doesn't exist. Doesn't exist at all. Because it's already out there, it's already all shot, so why not tickle the narcissist? You can almost imagine at the back of the car nudging Brad. Come on, Brad. Brad, what's the deal, man? Get with the program. They already have all this data. Can you just make the narcissist parent happy so that we can all live in peace? Brad is doing some good messaging today. Did y'all see his Groundhog Day messaging? Pretty strong. I genuinely can't believe y'all brought this on Groundhog Day. I genuinely can't believe it. Because in that movie, is it Bill Murray? Good actor, funny guy. He wakes up and lives the same day over and over and over again on February 2nd. And Punxsutawney Phil, the groundhog, keeps getting trotted out, 6 more weeks of winter or whatever. And it's a hero's journey, right? A Bildungsroman, Bill Murray has to learn how to laugh, love, and live in harmony with his community. And until he does that, he keeps repeating the same day over and over and over again. It gets so miserable for him that he throws himself in front of a train. He drives a car off a cliff. He'd rather die 1,000,000 times than live this day again. Some of you may feel that way. Some of you might feel like that nothing is worth continually tickling this man's ego. Biggest vote of all time, right? Like, it can't be worth it at some point. But anyway, Bill Murray escapes the trap. Because once he realizes that the power is not worth it, that the humanity, the basic humanity of the people in that community that he looked down on, that's the most important thing, whatever powers, held him hostage set him free. So I guess the message from Senate Republicans here on Groundhog Day is we are going to live the 2020 election day in and day out, over and over and over again, until we finally learn the lesson that if we really want to represent our constituents as well as they deserve, if we really want to be the people we look in the mirror and tell ourselves we are, then we have to cut this BS out. Thank you guys for your time today. I know it was
You do have a question, Senator.
I'm happy to answer questions.
I know you want to stay in the well a little longer.
I'm happy to answer.
Recognize the majority leader for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I do.
Senator, is what you presented the minority report?
It is. It is the report of the minority as to a lot of things.
Senator, will you further yield?
Probably as long as you'd like me to.
That's up to you. Senator, are you running for lieutenant governor?
Well, I wasn't going to bring that up, but as a matter of fact, I am.
Senator, will you further yield?
I would.
Is this mockery of a presentation that you presented today a tryout to earn the support of George Soros or Stacey Abrams?
I don't know if I owned a processing plant that had a canning line that I could can a more canned talking point than the one that you just used. What I will say is that voters want honesty. They want authenticity. This is something I actually care about. 20% of Americans, it's estimated, have a narcissistic parent. The likelihood is that up to, what's divided by 5? Over 10 senators in here have probably dealt with a difficult childhood environment for which a lot of this hits personally, right? And it just so happens that there is this template that exists in a lot of our personal lives that is also extremely useful for understanding what the country is going through right now, laid bare. So if you think this is a mockery of a performance or whatever it is you just said, I would invite you to consider the possibility that this is the truest thing that you've heard in a long time about Donald Trump and about your work on election issues in the Georgia General Assembly. So I'll defend this stuff till my grave, and it's really up to you whether you want to really process this, and as the 6th robot said, create a safe space for self-reflection.
Does the senator further yield?
All day.
Senator, I don't use AI, and I write my own stuff, so thank you. As going back to your interesting comments, do you believe George Soros represents Main Street, Georgia?
What I think is that, somebody's calling me, hold on, I should have turned
It's probably
this
George.
off. Yeah, it's probably, actually it was a journalist. So what I think the George Soros or Stacey Abrams or any names that we heard today, like I haven't heard a thing about the people across the hall. I haven't heard a thing about, in almost all of those hypotheticals you guys pose, there's a process in place. There's a process that resolves it. There's an ethics board that assesses a fine. There's a criminal process that leads to a conviction and a sentence. That's why we have institutions, to process problems. The problem with Trump is that because of you guys, because of the failure systematically for people to raise their voices in opposition to a would-be tyrant, we currently don't have the institutional strength to check this threat as it currently exists. And so you guys are playing with live ammunition. You've been playing with live ammunition for 10 years, telling yourself as the walls have been closing in that it's never going to be that bad. But the Second Amendment groups, I think, are giving you guys a canary in the coal mine, right? Which I didn't know how the Second Amendment groups would go, but after we saw the murder of Alex Preddy, and we see that the Second Amendment groups are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, Kristi Noem, Kash Patel, we don't want you guys to be saying that you can't bring a gun lawfully to a protest. That should be a little bit of a hint for you that some of this whataboutism, the like, well, what about George Soros? That people are going to see through that transparently as a deflection, a move of whataboutism to distract from what you're really doing, which is what it's really all about.
Senator, will you further yield?
I'm happy to.
Senator, do you believe Stacey Abrams was elected governor?
No, I don't think she was. I think she lost in a free and fair election. I think she knows that. I think we've all been saying that. So again, it's like you know, I hope Georgians, I don't know, there aren't any cameras. If Georgians are watching this, I hope that you are listening to the fixation of the Senate Republican majority. I hope that you're hearing that as the walls are closing in and Trump is, you know, annexing Greenland and deposing other, you know, heads of state and doing tariffs and sending ICE and CBP to terrorize people, I hope you hear that Georgia Senate Republicans, all they've got in the box is George Soros and Stacey Abrams. Like, that's all they got. And so if you guys have a better way to meet this moment than to rehash 5, 10-year-old talking points, I will yield for as long as you want to try.
Senator, I appreciate you being cute with your answers, but at the same time, that is the reality of what's going on in the state and your party, and you can continue to deny it. But we know where your talking points are coming from, and I hope that does help you on your road to lieutenant governor. Mr. President, I yield the road.
I think you've carried water extremely well for your daddy. Anybody else?
Recognize the senator from 56.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator yield?
I do yield to my colleague from the 56th.
Senator, are you familiar with the awful effects of Alzheimer's?
I am.
Senator, will you further yield?
I do.
Are you also familiar with the terrible effects of dementia?
I am familiar with that.
Senator, are you further aware of the effects adult children can have when their parents have dementia or Alzheimer's?
Yes. In fact, my uncle is suffering from some of that, so some of this has affected me personally as well.
Me as well. Thank you for being so genuine in your answer. Knowing that the prior administration was suffering from both of those things clearly, and most of the time couldn't put two complete sentences together, I didn't see this same board up during that time frame when you served in the Senate, where we probably would have seen someone as the caring child that wanted to just be there for mom or dad in that case. And I didn't see the one that said, let's just hide and pretend that dad really is okay. So, Senator, isn't it a little bit disingenuous that you are now focusing on the current president, yet for 4 years when the other one wasn't capable mentally or physically to be in office, you didn't point that out?
Do you know the meme of the dog that's in the room where everything's on fire and the dog says, "This is fine"? You familiar with that? This is like a millennial Gen Z thing, so I apologize if it doesn't.
I think the questions go the other way, but keep talking.
So imagine a room's on fire and we're in that room and I'm saying, guys, we should get out. The room is on fire. This is the equivalent, what you're asking me, of saying, you know, last week somebody farted in the room and it was very uncomfortable, but you didn't want to leave the room then. So I think it's pretty hypocritical that you want to leave this burning building now. That's what I think of your question.
Appreciate the analogy, Senator. I'm afraid something smells and it's coming from the well. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks very much. Listen, I know that this has gotten rancorous, but we didn't want this. We really didn't want this. But you guys are insisting on it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.